To say this group of characters have had a truly unfortunate run on the big screen is such an understatement. Through their various failed interpretations, it's basically been made a toxic wasteland for anyone who wants to try and pick up the roles and fix their images. And the thing is, it's not for a lack of star power or quality. Names like Chris Evans, Miles Teller, Michael B. Jordan have had leading roles in these movies. So you see how tragic and frustrating it is that with the caliber of actors that we've had joining the family, we have just the most amateur-like, uninteresting films. Bad dialogue, the tone of each of these movies always felt so contrived and unfocused, poor pacing, and lackluster vibe to these characters honestly make the effects the least of these films' problems. So the biggest hope fans had was that surely if anyone could fix the mess that these characters have become, it was gonna be the MCU. Problem is, Marvel has been in the most turbulent point of its existence. After they realized that just rapid fire throwing things at the wall to see what would stick wasn't working, they reeled back and have tried to not oversaturate the zeitgeist, but even then, the only successful films were the ones that had a very low chance of failing. Who really thought Deadpool and the Guardians were gonna have a bad third entry in their respective series? The problem was that even with something like Thunderbolts and even Daredevil, that MCU magic just isn't there anymore. All that led to arguably the worst time for Fantastic Four to have its resurgence just based off of historic performances. However, the riskiest times could also prove to be the best times to make a bold statement. Not to mention that they're riding the wave that James Gunn's Superman created. So, one of the first things that they got right with this version of Los Cuatro Fantásticos is bringing in Matt Shakman, the man behind WandaVision, which is easily regarded as one of the best Disney Plus shows, albeit it's not saying much, but nevertheless, good choice, Marvel. It's quite poetic and serendipitous that this is the fourth go at trying to bring the family to the big screen. Shockingly, Matt decided to make this family feel and act like a family. The movie took inspiration from something everybody loves, because this movie is basically The Incredibles, where they are a complete family. There's chemistry between the characters, they try and figure out the baby's powers. I mean, there's literally a character called Mole Man, which, I mean, come on. The premise of the film is how these characters have to struggle with their roles as heroes and as a family when they are faced with an insurmountable foe, Galactus, and have to defend Earth against him and his sidekick, the Silver Surfer. The beautiful thing that this film establishes is that it's its own isolated project. It's an entirely different Earth, and it has no knowledge of anything that we as the audience are aware of. It's basically a clean sheet, a fresh start. And at a time where the constant criticism of Marvel is that the films feel so self-indulgent, and that if you haven't been along from much earlier, then you might feel lost, because for so much of this universe, you need to have pre-existing knowledge of the things that happened before the movie you're watching. So it's quite literally a breath of fresh air when watching the film, because there's not that extra pressure of, uh-oh, did I not watch the last few films? Because if so, I might as well not watch this one, because I won't understand why the things are the way they are. And visually, this movie looks the least like other entries in the series. I mean, it's basically the Jetsons 1960s retro aesthetic, which was very cool, and it never felt weird or like, this is wrong, why is Marvel doing a period piece? No, it felt natural and believable that these characters just live in this world. That being said, it's still Marvel, so it still has the Marvel quips, the big action sequences, there's the typical banter and wit that you expect that are basically Marvel's trademark elements naturally, but I respect that you can tell that it's trying to be as unique and different as it can be within the confines of the MCU. And while I do think it could have shaved off a few minutes off the runtime, I think the pacing was really solid considering it was an hour and 55 minutes. It's never really pondering on things too much, it's constantly moving to different plot points, but it's never moving at breakneck speeds either. It's not over bloated or too slow where you're just sitting around waiting for things to happen, and one of the main reasons that that's the case is the characters. Pedro Pascal is just as charming and smart and funny as you'd expect. He plays Reed with such integrity and nuance in ways that have never really been seen before. You actually for the first time believe he's the smartest guy in the room, to the point that he doesn't even realize how far ahead he is than everybody else. He's always problem solving, he's pragmatic, to the point that there's a really intense scene between him and Sue that really lets you see Reed's true colors. Yes, he's good and altruistic, but his mind is so complex and broad that it can be conflated with being dark, because he's not the type to take an option off the table before really analyzing the consequences. And it's clear to him the weight of saving the world is on his shoulders because, well, it is. He has to be the one to solve the problem because no one else can. Although I will say he has officially now fallen into the same category as Anya Taylor-Joy, The Rock, and such, where they're just so oversaturated that they were everywhere at one point. Pedro's performance was excellent, but at least personally I would appreciate a breather until until the next project that he's on, even though, yeah, that's obviously not gonna happen. Joseph Quinn as Human Torch found a balance between being that charming, arrogant, yet likable jerk that you kinda assume Human Torch is, with a more skilled and talented individual that's not just a deadbeat that stumbled upon an awesome power and only knows how to showboat. Quinn was on his A game in this performance. Honestly, out of all the characters, Johnny's character was the most evolved compared to the previous iterations. This was basically like a redemption arc for his character. He showed tenacity, bravery, analytical skills, all while still convincing me that he's Johnny Storm. And in my opinion, he had the best scene of the entire movie. That duel at the end of the second act against the Surfer, where it was basically a harsh reflection exercise, was brilliant and so effective. And culminating with the shot of the Silver Surfer in front of the moon was such a gorgeous shot. It was disarming with how breathtaking it was, especially with how heavy it felt during the conversation on the ground. When she takes off and is above the clouds, it's like you're relieved as well. It was really well done. Mind the pun, but Ebon Moss-Bachrach is fantastic as Ben Grimm, aka The Thing. He's easily the most likable character of the film. I mean, it gets a little meta because he's like the superstar even within the film. He has the most fans and gets that hero recognition. I love that, yes, he has the whole clobbering thing, but he's smartly written in this film. He's not just a lesser Hulk that wants to smash everything. He's really kinda just an average guy that likes to stay in and ironically loves to cook. And you can never go wrong with going with the big lovable teddy bear that just so happens to be made of rocks. But the standout performance was honestly Vanessa Kirby, because she's essentially the emotional element to the film that is easiest to resonate with. Essentially, she's tethered to the crux of the film, and that doesn't mean that her only contribution to the film is to emotionally connect with the audience, but it's her actions and ultimately decisions that maybe the movie doesn't directly place on her, but you just naturally are inclined to empathize with her the most for taking part in that decision. And that decision propels the film into a darker space that you're not expecting going into this film. And I will say, this movie understands that Galactus' story is tethered to Los Cuatro Fantásticos, but it doesn't force every other scene to be some crazy action sequence either. Yes, there's awesome sequences, in particular that space sequence was amazing, but there's also plenty of substance in the film, especially in regards to ethics and morally gray decisions. The film is daring enough to force the viewer to question what would they do in that situation, and it's very easy to pick one side or the other, but the reality is that regardless of what decision is made, there's always going to be consequences. Hell, Sue's speech to the people was perfect. It came at a time in the movie where there was a need for hope, grounding, and realism, while still not feeling like it's holding back the story. Instead, it actually pushes the narrative along forward. And on top of that, the movie allows room to make these characters people. They're not just their skills and powers. You get to know their personalities and you feel how strongly they care for each other. And of course, there's clashes here and there. And like I said before, there's fun banter between them, but that only magnifies that family feeling so much more, because it's so easy to relate to a lighter, more somber moment just as much as a I'm annoyed at this relative moment as well. There's just a clear sense of camaraderie and family dynamic that was just never there before. And that's crucial when you're selling the idea of impending doom trying to destroy that thing that you've now become attached to. And speaking of threats of destruction, I think they did the best they could with Galactus. He's a force of nature more than a direct antagonist, with an amoral nature where he can't be reasoned with. And throughout the film, you feel his presence and the scale of calamity that he's capable of causing. That being said, he's just not that interesting to me. Like, I'm glad he's not just a giant fart cloud, but he feels more like a natural disaster than a being, so it's hard to see his view on things, and I know that's the point, but as a viewer, it's just not as engaging. And they almost had a good thing going with him, because in a weird way, he is the complete opposite of what the heroes represent. He's vain and only cares for his hunger to be quenched, while the foundation of the strength of the Fantastic Four is built on altruism and family. But Galactus just didn't impact as much as I would have liked, and part of that is because of that fairy tale ending where a multi-billion-year-old being was bamboozled in the most childish way ever. And another reason is that when we finally get to see Galactus in action, there's just not as much of an oomph in his movements and steps as I would have thought. Like, part of me was saying, for as big as he was, he should have been heavy enough to basically squash all those people that were hiding underground. And it's jarring that a man as smart as Reed really thought that that plan would work. Like, dude, really? That's the best you could come up with? That made both Reed and Galactus lose major aura points, and just in general, the way he was dealt with was just abrupt and out of the blue. Super happy that Ralph Ineson got to voice Galactus though. That man's voice is a treasure not meant to be wasted. Silver Surfer, on the other hand, played by Julia Garner, armor was awesome and an absolute menace. Julius Surfer had so much aura and finesse and always felt dangerous. It's worth noting you know these characters so well by the third act that with one look, a single glance, or a moment's hesitation is enough so both the other characters and you as a viewer know what someone is thinking. And it must be said that I truly appreciate that while the comedy is certainly there, it's reeled back and it's not a quip every other line. There's a healthy balance of comedy and drama, and not only did I find the comedy to work better here, but it never overstepped when things had to get more emotional. The emotional moments were satisfying and hit because they were consistent in tone, and when the movie wanted to be funny, it was funny. Like, I thought the bit of how many boys does it take to put in one car seat was hilarious and really funny. For as good as the movie looks, there was some weird shots that just trickled in, and not just with Baby Franklin, because wow did he look weird sometimes, but the main characters at times would look weird out of nowhere. I'd say my only gripe with the film is that while the Human Torch and Invisible Woman's powers got a lot of love, Ben and Reed's powers really needed better scenarios to showcase those powers. Especially Reed, he didn't really get much to do with his powers. Regardless, despite those little nitpicks, this is a really great movie and easily the best iteration of Los Cuatro Fantásticos. And it seems there could be a light at the end of the tunnel depending on how Marvel moves forward after this. But that's it for me. I'd appreciate a thumbs up, subscribe, and sincerely yours, Anthony.